Hey vinyl community, this is Tim with the University of Vinyl coming back today with a new video. It's been a little bit of a struggle here locally recently. We had a downspout or a microburst that took out 10 power
behind the scenes that make everything happen. You could just imagine what a giant pain in the ass this has to be. To reroute and reschedule and postpone.
about 2 miles down the road from my house and from my neighborhood. And that combined with 101 degree heat, combined with internet Xfinity outages, means I'm not able to really do a whole lot as far as videos are concerned. So it's been a rough few days, but I am back today, enjoying some air conditioning, some creature comforts like high-speed internet, and I think I can kind of put something up, get it processed, and uploaded to YouTube, hopefully by tomorrow. Anyway, thanks for sticking with me. Today I want to talk about, I've been researching a new video. It's kind of in this series that I'm doing featuring different legendary mastering engineers. And in working on that video, when I had power to power my turntable and system, whether it's here or in the other room, I found myself listening to Led Zeppelin's Houses of the Holy, and I have a particular pressing that I needed to hear again because I'm researching a mastering engineer who has done one of the infamous Led Zeppelin pressings, and it's actually a Houses of the Holy pressing. So anyway, I started thinking about Led Zeppelin again. And you know how Michael from 45 RPM Audiophile in Dusseldorf, if you haven't seen his stuff, check out his channel. Great guy, great content, growing like wildfire, getting some incredible gets as far as interviews. I think Danny from Sonic Flare apparently is helping him out getting the introductions. Shout out to Danny at Sonic Flare, another incredible great channel. This guy's got a wealth of knowledge and information. He's an industry vet, so check out his channel if you haven't yet. Anyway, back to Led Zeppelin. And Michael has a saying going around: buy now or cry later. And when we talk about Led Zeppelin, if you are a discernible person wanting to find incredible sounding Led Zeppelin pressings, everybody knows for the most part that the classic records releases back in the mid 2000s, those are the creme de la creme in many cases. Now, the classic records Led Zeppelin releases are long out of print. And when we say cry later, we can all start crying unless you really have got the dollars and the wherewithal to go ahead and get these pressings in the secondhand market. You can prowl eBay and Discogs all day. You can set up alerts. But I'm telling you now, you're not going to be touching Led Zeppelin II, Led Zeppelin IV, or Houses of the Holy for anywhere under at least $300, okay? And between myself and everyone watching, I kind of have an internal limit on what I'm willing to pay for an audiophile pressing. And it's under $300. Now, I will raise my hand and say I think I've gone north of 200 for particular pressings that I'm interested in, and gotta have gotta have stuff. But when we're talking about 300, 400, 500 and more, which is the current marketplace for the classic records Led Zeppelin releases, I can't get on that boat. So, and also, you know, these things were released back in 2005, 16 years ago, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know about everybody else watching, but I started to get back. I started to have hankerings and feelings and a bit of an itch that I started to scratch concerning vinyl and putting together vintage stereo systems again. I kind of started that feeling back in 2010, so 11 years ago. And even in 2010, when I was just getting into this, I was still researching what's a good receiver to get, what's a good amp to get, how about some vintage speakers. So I actually started down this road by researching the equipment first. I figured the records would come later. And I would be out and about, you know, indoor flea market, and I kind of saw, you know, used record stores as kind of dusty old places selling nostalgia, frankly, and I never really ventured in. But slowly but surely, things started to kind of creep back into my consciousness. I was in a place in 2010 after having been traveling and kind of on the road for 10 years where I actually could kind of assemble everything in one place, at least for a certain time frame, and think about kind of building out a really nice system. So that's kind of where I started with this. And I might be circling around again a little bit here, but anyway, so back in 2010, I was just getting my wetting my whistle as far as this whole hobby that we're all involved in. Wasn't buying pressings, wasn't looking at pressings. If I was like in an antique shop or flea market and I saw some vintage records, I might take a thumb through, and something that might have caught my eye, I might pick up one or two copies of albums that I remember from back in the day. But I didn't get serious with this really again. I didn't start really, I think I made a Discogs account in 2017. So what's that, 4 years ago now? Can't believe how time flies. And what I've been doing in all of the research and learning more about classic records and these renowned pressings, you know, Michael from 45 Audiophile talks about the classic records. He raptures on, is gorgeous, 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 and I 100% believe him, and I would love to have those in my collection. Maybe one day I will get lucky and I'll get one or two or three or four different Led Zeppelin classic records releases. Now, what about future releases with Led Zeppelin? Is that catalog going to be licensed out again? Is someone going to have an opportunity to do those master tapes justice? Are those master tapes in good shape to be utilized again? That remains an open question. We do know that Analog Productions, owned by Chad Kassem, purchased Classic Records and all of their assets and licenses, I don't know, a couple years ago, I believe. But in my mind, seeing that these Led Zeppelin releases with Classic Records came out in the mid-2000s, I can't believe that there's any existing remaining license rights to put out more titles. So Negotiations would have to occur. Maybe someone is doing negotiations, who knows? So we have that to maybe look forward to and keep an eye on the horizon. Now, in 2014, Jimmy Page oversaw an entire new release schedule of all of the Led Zeppelin albums, overseen by Jimmy Page. You would think, wow, I mean, the general public, when they hear that, ooh, Jimmy Page has personally looked at these, approved the mixes, the remasters. Certainly, it must be great, right? I'll raise my hand and say I haven't heard any of them. But what I have heard in various YouTube videos is a lot of people whose opinion that I've come to trust and rely on, they're saying they're from digital files. They're too trebly, they're too digital. There's not that tubey, warm, analog sound. So when I heard this, I decided I'm not dropping any cash down for, I don't care if they're 28, 30, 32 bucks. I'm not going to waste my time. Not doing it. So given all that, I have gotten relatively lucky over the last 2-3 years to find the OGs, the original pressings. Now, if you're concerned with pressing plant talk, dead wax matrices, stop watching right now and move on, because we're going to have to geek out a little bit here and talk about those things. And I've got a few photos of the actual pressings that I have in my collection that I'm going to share. But anyway, that's today. We're going to talk about Led Zeppelin, and I'm going to talk about 3 albums only, just because I wanted to focus on these 3. I think they have interesting stories as far as kind of the chain of mastering is concerned. So I'm going to talk about Led Zeppelin II, Led Zeppelin IV, otherwise known as the Zoso album, and then we're going to talk about Houses of the Holy. Stay tuned. In 1969, Led Zeppelin released 2 albums that year, their inaugural year in rock and roll history. Led Zeppelin I came out early in 1969, and then later on in 1969, of course, came Led Zeppelin II. And with Led Zeppelin II, there was a young mastering engineer named Robert Ludwig. I've talked about him many times on this channel, who basically was given first crack at mastering the new album from Led Zeppelin. And Robert Ludwig came up with what is known in the business as a hot cut. Hot cut meaning incredibly dynamic. All spectrums were present, including the low end, lots of bass, and high volume. This thing was mixed loud, very loud. And the president of Atlantic Records, I believe it was Ahmet Ertegun at the time, took a fresh, minty, hot off the press, Robert Ludwig mastered Led Zeppelin II album, gave it to his daughter. She put it on her turntable in an excited state, just waiting to hear the new album and what Jimmy Page, John Paul Jones, Robert Plant, John Bonham had come up with. And we can do some digging and probably find out exactly what was the make and model of the turntable that the young lady possessed. But what happened is she put that album on, and this thing was so dynamic, so bass heavy, that the lower end model of turntable that she was using couldn't handle it. The tone arm jumped. The stylus jumped. And Amit Erdogan kind of reacted in horror and said, my God, we can't put this out to the general marketplace. In that state, people, the majority of consumers out there just don't have the right high-end turntables to be able to handle a hot cut like this. Nope, nope, nope. So off to the lacquering mastering engineers they went, and what came back was a rolled off, woolly, very low bass, not very dynamic, and not very loud. In a word, boring. That's what was put out for the most part in 1969 when this album, Led Zeppelin II, was released. Now, the good news is there are a lot of Robert Ludwig presses, a lot of Robert Ludwig pressings that were released out into the marketplace to the tune of about, legend has it, about 200,000 copies actually were released, bought up, and in people's homes. And between 1969 and 2021, they occasionally pop up for sale by people who either A, know what they have, or B, have no idea what they have. 2 months ago, I walked into a record shop about 20 miles away from my house. It was the first time that I had ever been into this shop, and I had heard things about, well, you need to check this place out. It's like a museum. This person's got an incredible inventory. 8 copies of Dark Side of the Moon are just sitting in the Pink Floyd section. Multiple copies of this album, that album. Used MoFis. So I made a point to go into that shop, and I was there for over an hour. And I went to the Led Zeppelin bin and saw 1 copy of Led Zeppelin II. And knowing the legend of this whole RL hot cut, checked the dead wax. And guess what? There was an RL SS on side 1 and side 2 of the dead wax. RL is Robert Ludwig's etched initials. SS stands for Sterling Sound. Robert Ludwig was working for Sterling Sound in 1969, and he mastered this album at Sterling Sound in New York City in 1969 and delivered the final product to the powers that be. And what I just talked about happened, and about 200,000 copies of this album are out there in people's collections, but they're occasionally out there. And this is a near mint copy. The vinyl is lustrous, shiny black, no markings, and almost dead quiet. Now, when we're talking about Led Zeppelin II and the desired pressing to have, this is number 1. Number 2 is the Classic Records reissued mid-2000s audiophile pressing. I was lucky enough only 2 months ago to find this out in the wild. I'm just telling people, you people out there in YouTube land, anything's possible. And the shopkeeper in the store did not know what they had. And they put a retail price of $30 for this album, which I was happy to pay. And if we go on eBay, Discogs, you're going to find, well, first of all, it's very, very, very difficult to find the RL cuts in near mint condition. So I consider myself incredibly lucky. I'm trying not to be a boasting person right now, but I'm very happy to have found this. But I'm here to tell everybody else, you can find these things too. I've heard stories of people selling these on eBay. They have no idea, they're an antique dealer and they're dabbling in selling vinyl records, and they're listing them on eBay, and people might ask about the dead wax and what's the information, what's the matrix information. An email inquiry will go unanswered. But sometimes if there's enough photos and enough evidence, and you can pick it up for 20 or 30 bucks, maybe it's worth doing a little risky eBay transactions, and seeing what comes back. Anyway, it's a gorgeous album. Got this thing wrapped and sealed, of course, in the Vinyl Storage Solutions, now VC famous, crystal clear 4mm product with the pocket, the 2 pockets. Anyway, so that is what you're looking for. You want a double RL cut, even better if Sterling Sound SS is in both sides as well. Now, we're going to have to go dig a little deeper and talk about pressing plants. And I've got some notes here. So that copy that I have is... on the label, it has a suffix of -CP. That stands for Columbia Records Pressing Plant in Pitman, New Jersey. That is a renowned pressing plant. They were in operation from 1961 to 1986, pressing vinyl for various record companies. In '86, it was converted to CD manufacturing, and I don't know, I looked up a Wikipedia entry on this, and I think they finally closed in like 2001. Pumped out tons of music on both the vinyl and CD format. There are people on forums who are saying that the Monarch press from the Monarch pressing plant in California, not only for this album, but also for Houses of the Holy and also for Led Zeppelin I, if you can find something with MO on it, you're looking at a really good sounding pressing. For whatever reason, there were slight variations between different pressing plants as far as the quality, roundness, fullness of the sound. Now, saying all that, if you get an RL Led Zeppelin II, the most important thing beyond pressing plants is the condition of the record. You want to have something that is, first of all, flat. We don't like warpage, right? But you want something that's in great condition. So hopefully quiet, or at least very, very quiet as possible, i.e. little to no surface noise. That's the holy grail. And it doesn't really matter. We're splitting hairs when we talk about pressing plants. But I just wanted to throw that in there because that is some of the chatter that's out there in the marketplace. People talk about different pressing plants with the Led Zeppelin albums. Anyway, I have a Columbia Records pressing plant. CP is the suffix. I have another copy of this album I'm going to show you now. And remember, these early pressings, what we're looking for is SD8236. Okay? That's the old 4-digit catalog number. In later years and represses and reissues that were put out, they moved to a 5-number system. So right off the bat, you want to find that 8236 number to even be in the running for the RL Derby, right? The other thing you want to be sure of is that on the actual record labels, you've got the 1841 Broadway address for Atlantic Records. In later years, they moved headquarters to Rockefeller Plaza. So if you have Rockefeller Plaza, you're out of the running. Go back to go. Dumb analogy. Anyway, so that's important. Now, this album and this album, they both have the 8236. However, the actual dead wax information in this album is a dead giveaway. There is a CTH stamped in the matrix. CTH stands for Columbia Terre Haute. So that's a Columbia Records pressing plant, not Pittman, like the one that I have, but this is another pressing plant, and in Terre Haute, Indiana. There is absolutely no engravings or stamps or any indication of a mastering engineer in that matrix, in that dead wax. And when I did an A-B comparison between the Terre Haute version and the RL, it was night and day. I kept the volume levels the same. I played a portion of the same song, and the RL is just huge as far as soundstage is concerned. Tons of bass. The cymbal crash on some of these songs from Bonham was just earth-shattering. And then I put on the other pressing, the Terre Haute pressing, and it was night and day, trust me. I'm going to drop a link to Baraka P. Dub did a really cool video on Led Zeppelin II a few years ago and compared different pressings and did some needle drops. So I'm gonna drop that in. You can check it out. So that's my Led Zeppelin II story. Yeah, I don't have the classic records pressing. I may never have it, but I've got that RL, and I have a near mint RL, and life is good. In 1973, the mastering engineer Robert Ludwig was still working at Sterling Sound in New York. And that band that we're talking about, Led Zeppelin, came out with Houses of the Holy. released in 1973. Catalog number on those early pressings is SD7255. SD7255, that 4-digit catalog system that they still had in place 4 years down the road from Led Zeppelin II, 1969, that we talked about. So Robert Ludwig was given an opportunity to master another Led Zeppelin release. And what I'm holding in my hand is the RL cut of Houses of the Holy. Similar to Led Zeppelin II RLs, and even more important on this album, you want to find a clean, quiet copy, and it's easier said than done. This happens to be VG++, almost near mint. My favorite song on this album is No Quarter. Remember, that song starts out very, very quiet, and you've got John Paul Jones coming in with the mellotron, and eventually we've got that nasty, distorted, compressed guitar from Jimmy Page. But there's a lot of quiet passages on this album, and if you have a crackly, gunky, dirty sounding record, it's not good. So maybe you go find one of these and you're looking for RL in the dead wax again, and this time instead of SS for sterling sound, there's an actual sterling stamp in the dead wax. I'm going to show a photo of mine, but that's what you're looking for. This is a really, really good, solid pressing, and ladies and gentlemen, instead of $300, $400, $500 with the Classic Records audiophile release from the mid-2000s, go on Discogs, do a little digging, keep an eye out on eBay, keep an eye out in the wild, and you can find this for $15, $20, $30, maybe $40 for a really good example. Buy it if you see it. Get it ultrasonically clean. Maybe you have your own cleaner. Put it through its paces. See what it sounds like. Now, I don't have any UK pressings. There are a lot of lucky folks out there in the VC. Dylan from Noble Records comes to mind. He put out his Led Zeppelin, I think it's a 2-parter video, a couple of years ago. He's got Japanese pressings, he's got UK pressings, but he also has incredible, good sounding OG pressings. Now, I have some more notes on Houses of the Holy. The one that I have, the rim address on the actual labels is 1841 Broadway again. They had not moved yet to 75 Rockefeller. If you have an 1841 Broadway album, it was the first press from 1973. Later pressings, 1974 onwards, had 75 Rockefeller Plaza as the address in the rim text of the label. Now, the particular pressing plant, again, for this one, I have the suffix of the catalog number is -RI, which stands for Richmond, Indiana. That was the PRC Recording Company pressing plant situated in Richmond, Indiana. As I mentioned before, if you don't have the Classic Records pressing, like many of us unfortunately do not, look for this. Look for a later RL, either a first run, 1973, or maybe even a second or a third pressing that have RL and the dead wax with sterling sound. and I think you'll be very happy, but it all comes down again to condition. You want a clean copy of Houses of the Holy. The early pressings, of course, came with that heavy cardstock inner, which is really nice. And on the bottom of that inner, it also lists the 1841 Broadway address. Houses of the Holy, one of my favorite Led Zeppelin albums. In 1971, Led Zeppelin released their fourth album, the self-titled, also known as the Zoso album. There it is. And I have an early U.S. first press. You may be able to see that the person who originally owned this album actually helpingly put the title Zoso of the album and then Led Zeppelin at the bottom. Helps with cataloging, I suppose. What to say about this album? So this is one of the renowned Led Zeppelin releases. A lot of people go back and forth. Oh, Led Zeppelin I, Led Zeppelin II, Led Zeppelin IV. Those vary as far as favorites are concerned with most people. Now, very interesting, there was a UK mastering engineer. His name was George Peckham. I'm going to have more on him in the following video. And this guy is very kind of particular, kind of funny. He wouldn't just put in his initials into dead wax. He had various nicknames, and when he felt quite proud of a pressing, he actually had a different phrase that he would put. But for this particular U.S. pressing, early U.S. pressing that I have, this is catalog number SD 7208, so still on the 4-digit catalog numbering system of the Led Zeppelin early albums. I have a George Peckham cut, and on side 1, instead of GP for George Peckham, you will find etched into the dead wax Porky, P-O-R-K-Y. On side 2, you will find Pecko Duck, P-E-C-K-O-D-U-C-K, second word, Pecko Duck. Now, there is a thread on the Steve Hoffman forums. It is currently 105 pages long on the ultimate Led Zeppelin pressings. You know the saying where everyone has an opinion, just like you and I, anyway. Everyone has their own opinion. They have their own listening setups, and what's important is what you hear, right? I mean, we always say that. It's all about the music, and hopefully you have a good, decent system that's going to reproduce this analog product and be pleasing to your ears. Now, when we talk about the physical format, the vinyl format, you of course want to find something in this later age and date that is quiet and good sounding, not scratched up, and not, you know, riddled with gunk and gouges and pops and clicks. If you find a copy of an early pressing of Led Zeppelin IV, like I've said previously, give it a shot. Get it ultrasonically cleaned and see what happens. See what you come out with. But the first thing you want to do is locate an early pressing, U.S. pressing, that has the George Peckham nomenclatures in the dead wax, Porky and Pecko Duck. On that 105 page Steve Hoffman Forum's thread on the Led Zeppelin, the Ultimate Pressings, and people's opinions of them, this ranks high, as does the UK First Plum label pressing, and of course that Classic Records audiophile reissue. This particular pressing that I have on Discogs, it starts, I believe, at $30 and goes to 65 bucks. And you know, you're going to be paying more to someone on Discogs for a clean copy, of course. It's going to be north of $30, $40, $50 probably. But again, I found this 2 years ago in one of those indoor antique malls. There was a vinyl dealer guy who had a stall in one of these places, and lo and behold, every album was on sale that weekend for $5 each, and he had a deal: if you bought 4, your 5th was free. And funny enough, he had like his original prices were on there, and I think he had this thing priced at 20 bucks. And I looked at the vinyl on this thing, lots of luster, lots of shine, put it on my turntable. I was blown away. Okay, this rivals, in my opinion, it's coming close to that RL Led Zeppelin II as far as ultimate soundstage, dynamic sound, plenty of bass. Anyway, I was happy to find this. Now this was actually pressed. This is there's a PR in the dead wax as well in the matrix. That stands for Presswell, which is another pressing plant that was actually based in, looking at my notes, in Cora, New Jersey. They started pressing vinyl in 1958 all the way up into the 1990s. So this is a Presswell cut, but it's a George Peckham mastered Presswell pressing. Say that 5 times. Another good pressing plant to look for is that Monarch, the MO Monarch. That is Led Zeppelin IV. Again, ladies and gentlemen, if you don't have to cry because you didn't get a copy of those Classic Records reissues that came out in the mid-2000s. They're incredibly expensive today. If you didn't buy way back then, or maybe even into 5-6 years ago when they were more affordable, just know there's still hope out there. Go look for OGs. See what you can find. Clean them up. And you might be very, very, very pleasantly surprised. I will catch everybody on the next video. Thank you for watching today. Thanks for all the likes and comments recently. I chime in quite often when I can. I'm getting people dinging me, sending me DMs on Instagram. Follow me on Instagram if you're not. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, I really would appreciate it. It helps as far as helping other people find my channel that maybe not have stumbled across it before. So enough about that. Hope everyone has a fantastic night, and I will see you soon. Take care.